Welcome back to the Nancy Levin Show. Today I want to talk about a word, a quality, a role, an identity, visionary. It is one that for years I disowned. I saw the quality in others, teachers I admired, leaders I watched from the wings, but it was a quality, a role, an identity that I did not hold about myself. And continuing to disown that quality came at a high cost. And once I started to really step into the embodiment of visionary, everything began to change. I wasn't really aware of the cost. But recently, because of a change I'm making in terms of what I'm offering in my business, I really started to look at what not owning visionary held me back from in the past. Because I suspect I'm not the only one here who's been living inside the walls of what is practical, or what is proven, or what is already real, and calling that clarity, calling that groundedness, calling that wisdom. When really some of it, a lot of it, is fear wearing a very reasonable disguise. So let me share what I actually used to believe about visionaries, because I thought they were other people. Not me. I thought visionary defined someone with grand ideas, an idea a minute, the sweeping missions, the ability to see 10 years out and talk about it with certainty. I thought visionaries were only like the Steve Jobs type, the ones who could hold a room wrapped with a picture of the future so vivid that everyone else could see it too, and then hand it off to a team to actually make it real. And that last part is important because in my mind, visionaries were ideators. They had an idea a minute. They generated, they inspired, they pointed at the horizon, and then other people built the road. And that was never me. I was the one who made things happen. I was the executor. I was the producer, the person behind the scenes who took someone else's vision and figured out how to bring it to life for years, literally nearly 2 decades of my life as a producer. That was my professional identity. I produced events for some of the most visionary teachers in the world of personal growth, and I excelled at it. And so somewhere in that excellence, I decided that's who I am. And that's all I am. I'm an executor. I'm the one who takes someone else's vision and makes it real. But I'm not the one who has the vision. I'm the practical one, the tactical one, the one who deals in what is, not in what could be. And for a long time, I really wore that like a badge of honor. But what's interesting here, and what makes this all so much more layered for me, is that I absolutely can access my vision. We all have a vision within us. Your vision does not need to be created. It simply needs to be dusted off and brought into the light of day. And for years, I was unable to make that leap from having a vision, which I define simply as my ideal set of desired circumstances. I wasn't able to make that leap from having a vision to being a visionary. And the truth is, we all have access to our vision. A significant part of my coaching career has been built on guiding people to uncover their vision, to make choices and take action in the direction of bringing their vision to fruition. to help people get quiet enough to really locate that vision. And that has been the heart of my work. So it wasn't that I couldn't see possibility. It was that I didn't think that made me a visionary as a role, as an identity, because my definition was visionary as ideator, generator, someone who had a constant stream of new ideas. And again, handed it off to someone else to execute. But since I'm a doer by nature, someone who likes to build, to complete, to implement, to move, I thought I was doing entrepreneurship wrong. Like I was missing a gene that real business owners and founders had. Like visioning was a skill I lacked rather than an identity I was simply refusing to claim. And what I've had to learn, and I still embrace the learning here, is that having ideas, trusting my own clarity, and then inviting collaboration and delegation is what brings things to life. That is visionary leadership. That's what it looks like. I don't have to generate 100 ideas a minute. I just have to trust the ideas that I do have. And then I also get to let others help me make them real. And here's where this gets a bit more personal and vulnerable, because one of the reasons I disowned the role of visionary is there was something about that felt too much like pretend. And I used to think that hope was pretend. Hope felt dangerous to me. Hope felt like setting yourself up, like building a house on sand and then being shocked when it doesn't hold. Because I had learned through experience, through loss, through the particular shape my life took, that wanting something too much was risky. And that imagining a future that I couldn't guarantee was a fast track to disappointment. That had me disown visionary. I became a person who dealt in the actual, in the practical, in the tangible, versus the possibility. Because when something is real and it's here and I can touch it and I can measure it, it makes sense to me. And I became someone who was very, very good at assessing reality, very uncomfortable with anything that required me to imagine beyond reality. Because as a visionary, when we're leading our team, we need to set goals. And I always felt like setting goals felt arbitrary, felt unrealistic. And I like what's real. I like what's realistic. But here's the thing, staying in what's realistic keeps us small. So here's what I understand that I didn't then. When you only work with what is, you cut yourself off from what could be. And what could be, that's where everything new lives. In the unknown, possibility is born. That's where the next version of your life lives, the next version of your business, the next version of your relationship, of your creative work. If I can only build from what already exists, I will only ever replicate what already exists. And that's a very quiet, very respectable way of keeping yourself small. And so here's what happened. As I mentioned, I'm making a significant change in my business. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I will very soon. But what I can tell you is that this shift has required something of me that I wasn't fully anticipating. It required me to fully step in to embody the role of visionary, not the executor, not the strategist, not the one who makes someone else's dream real. This is about me and my vision that I want to bring to fruition. And I had to really sit with this I had to really let this land, because previously sitting in that space was destabilizing for me. I really had no map for this. I had no prior version of myself to reference. I had never done this before in this particular way. And the thing that scared me the most wasn't the work. It wasn't the strategy or the logistics or the learning curve. It was activating my imagination. This is the part where I had to really close my eyes and let myself see something that didn't exist yet, where I had to let myself want something I couldn't prove was possible, where I had to stop asking, but is this realistic? And start asking, what if it is? That's the part. That's the hard part, because I want to talk about pretending here. I think pretending gets a bad reputation, especially among people like us who are high achievers or strivers or people who pride ourselves on being real and being honest and being grounded. We tend to think pretending is childish or dishonest, or at best, a nice little visualization exercise that you do for 5 minutes and then you go back to real work. But here's what I'm discovering, or rather rediscovering, because I have known this in some form for actually quite a long time. Pretending is a portal. Pretending is the beginning of everything real. In my book, Jump and Your Life Will Appear, which I wrote well over a decade ago, there is an entire step of the process devoted to what I call imagine yourself free. The whole invitation here is to use your imagination as a portal, to picture yourself already on the other side of a leap you haven't yet taken, and let that imagination pull you forward. I wrote that practice into the book because I had lived it. When I was facing my divorce, imagine yourself free was what got me through it. I used my imagination on a daily basis to get genuinely excited about what my life would look like solo. My own space, my own rhythms, my own becoming. The imagination didn't make the divorce any easier, but it made it possible. It gave me something to walk toward. And then when I left my job at Hay House and stepped into entrepreneurship, which again was now nearly 12 years ago, I did the same thing. I imagined myself free into a life I couldn't yet prove was waiting for me, but it was. So I've had this tool, I've used it, I've taught it to thousands of people, and somehow I got amnesia. I wasn't fully applying it to myself as a business owner. I still didn't call what I was doing visioning. I didn't let myself be the visionary, because there's a difference between using imagination as a tool in a specific moment of transition and claiming imagination as a fundamental part of how you lead, how you build, how you show up in your business every single day. And that second part, the ongoing identity level embrace of imagination as leadership, was what I had been missing. And that is what I've been stepping into with full embodiment now. Every building in the world was pretend before it was architecture. Every relationship was a wish before it was a wedding. Every business was a dream before it was a business plan. The imagination must come first, without exception. And if you're someone who has shut down imagination for safety, for practicality, for self-protection, for any reason, you have cut off the very faculty that generates the future. You have made yourself capable of maintenance, but not of creation. And I don't know about you, but I did not come here to just maintain. So I want to share with you what's actually happening in my life right now because it's new enough that it still surprises me when I notice it. I have been daydreaming. This might sound small for you, but for me, at 61 years old, for the very first time in my life, I'm daydreaming. I'm looking out my window and allowing desire to take over. I'm not running through my to-do list. I'm actually drifting. I'm letting my mind wander somewhere my heart wants to go. And the funny thing is that I keep noticing in myself that I want to go back to the Camino de Santiago. So last year, I took a 3-week sabbatical. For the first time, I left my computer at home for 3 weeks. I walked 125 miles in 10 days through Spain, and that changed me in ways I'm still unpacking. And now something in me wants to go back. And what's wild and what tells me something is genuinely shifting inside of me is that I've been leaning into this imagining, leaning into this desire. I've actually been looking up things online, checking availability, reading about different routes, feeling something I can only describe as hopeful anticipation about something that hasn't happened yet and isn't even scheduled. I'm fantasizing about going back to the Camino. And I will tell you that the me of even a year ago would have shut that down immediately. She would have said, that's not practical for right now. Focus on what's in front of you. You are building something new. You can travel later when things are more settled, when the timing's right, when. But me today is letting myself want what I want, letting it be a real desire, letting myself daydream and fantasize about it, allowing that fantasy to exist without immediately needing to even resolve it into a plan. And this is new. It's teaching me something essential about what it means to be a visionary because desire is data. So the reframe I want to offer you here, the one that has been shifting something fundamental in me, is that desire is not irresponsible. Wanting things is not a weakness. Fantasizing about your future is not a waste of time. These are not self-indulgences to be earned after you've finished all the real work. These are the real work because your desires are data. They're information about who you are, what matters to you, and what your soul is oriented toward. They are the compass. And if you've been dismissing that compass, rationalizing it away, calling it impractical, telling yourself to be realistic, you have been navigating without your most essential instrument. I spent decades being very good at the map. I could read a map excellently. I could follow a plan, execute a strategy, hit the milestones. But the compass, the inner compass, knowing what I actually want and where I actually want to go, I shut that down for decades. It wasn't until I started imagining myself free and started actually creating a list of desires that I allowed myself to want. And what I'm experiencing all over again in the middle of this professional pivot is that the compass, the inner compass, is the whole thing. The map is useful, but the inner compass tells us the direction that we want to go on that map. And so I want to be honest with you about what I'm actually experiencing here, because I think the messy middle is where so many of us live, and I don't want to pretend I've arrived somewhere I haven't. I am practicing owning I am a visionary. I'm really leaning into what it feels like to let my imagination lead. And I'm catching myself whenever I say, is that realistic? And I'm choosing with intention to stay in the imagination a little longer. I don't need to pull it back to earth so soon. Some days it seems irresponsible, which I know is the old conditioning talking because I'm doing it anyway. I am giving myself permission to hold a vision for my business that is bigger than anything I have ever built before, even though I can't see all the steps yet. I'm giving myself permission to want, to genuinely really want, without immediately needing to know how I'm going to get. And something is loosening in me. Something is opening in me. A door I didn't even know was closed is swinging wide open, slowly. And the light on the other side is something I continue to walk toward. So if any of this is landing in you, if you recognize yourself in what I'm describing, I'm here to say, give yourself permission to daydream. Give yourself permission to want what you can't explain or justify or map out. Give yourself permission to let your hope be real, even if hope feels uncertain. You are allowed to be the visionary of your own life, even if you've never held that identity before, even if the word doesn't feel like it fits yet, even if you've spent years or decades being the practical one, the responsible one, the one who deals in facts and keeps their feet on the ground. The ground is still there. It will be there. But you're also allowed to look up, and you're allowed to look ahead. You're allowed to look toward what you are aching for, to let yourself be pulled by something that doesn't yet exist. Because here's what I know to be true. Having walked through some version of this myself, you cannot get somewhere new by only working with what's already here. The new, the next, the possible, the version of your life that you actually want, it lives in your imagination first. And that imagination is not a luxury. It's not self-indulgence. It's not pretending in the pejorative sense. It is the most serious, the most sacred, the most essential work there is. A very wise woman, when I said to her, I feel like hope is pretend, said to me, hope is possibility, and possibility leads to probability. So I want to leave you with something, not homework, not a to-do, simply a question. What have you been wanting, really wanting in the quiet of yourself that you've been calling impractical? What desire have you been sitting on because the timing isn't right, or the how isn't perfectly clear, or it just feels too big or too indulgent or too much like hoping? What would you let yourself imagine if you gave yourself full permission? And what would you let yourself have? Sit with it. Let it breathe. Don't rush to make it practical. Don't immediately turn it into a plan. Remember, your imagination, pretending, is a portal. Let yourself want and see what opens.